Good afternoon, folks. My name is Jimmy Bashar with the ISO Stakeholder Affairs Group. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to our informational call to discuss our new daily Day Ahead Summer Report. As you may know, we will begin posting our load forecasting updates to the residual unit commitments or RUC process that is part of our Day Ahead market process within this new report to help inform market conditions as part of our continual effort to increase market transparency. I am joined today by Guillermo Batista, our Director of Market Analysis and Forecasting, and Joanne Serena, our Executive Director of Customer Service and Stakeholder Affairs. Guillermo will walk you through our new report, I believe, and after he is done familiarizing us with that in his presentation, we will take questions at the end. As a reminder, you can ask questions. If you dialed in through your computer audio, please use the raise hand icon to ask questions. However, if you've used the phone or dialed in separately, then you must push #2 to get into the question queue. And we'll do all of that after Guillermo's through, as mentioned. And lastly, this call is recorded for convenience, allowing those who are unable to attend to listen afterwards, and which we'll make available on the meeting's webpage following the call for a limited time. And of course, these recordings and any related transcriptions should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. And with that, I will give it to Guillermo.
Thank you, Jimmy. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Let me share my screen and we can go from there. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for calling in. We are having this short call to introduce a report we have started to post last week. And as a background, you may recall we had a discussion about the mid-June market performance in the last MPPF, and then most recently when we discussed the June report. A common topic on that discussions was the RUC adjustments that are done in the day ahead market. We explained the reason, the logic as to why we do that RUC adjustment through the RUC process and how we can have these adjustments to the requirements, which effectively add or subtract, because the adjustment can be positive or negative, to the day ahead load forecast. We have referred to this as RUC adjustments. We have provided some metrics about these adjustments in these discussions of the market analysis. And from these discussions, there has been a common request and comments actually about regarding these RUC adjustments and how it's been utilized in the day ahead market. One request that was clear is that participants were looking for more transparency about the values and how often and when they are done. And granted that we still have a lot of discussions about the transparency item and how we can have a long-term solution, what we're trying to achieve here through this daily report is a temporal measure to give you as much transparency as is feasible from our end at this point. And that is the whole reason why we are starting to post this report. This report is only for the day ahead market and is in relationship to the RUC process. This report is going to be posted typically 1-2 hours after the day ahead market completes. Typically, our market may be completed prior to 1 p.m., and that means by 2-3 p.m. you should be able to have that report available. There may be some cases in which the market may be taking longer to run, and therefore the report may be posted a bit later. But we are aiming at posting this report right after the day ahead market is complete. And you can see that there are a few days already with this report. We started to do that last week, and we will continue to do this through summer. The expectation is that we can continue to do this at least through the end of September, and we can assess conditions as we approach that time. That is the background as to why we are doing this. And again, there are some initiatives like the load and forward scheduling in which this topic is being discussed, I believe through that discussion we may have a permanent solution how we're going to be able to provide this level of transparency, what mechanism we may use to automatically provide that information at the market. With that, let me just walk you quickly through the content of the report. And it's not really a report, it's one table that you're going to see here consistently, and that is for the applicable trading day that we are posting for that day. And it has different columns, and each column is, I believe, should be relatively intuitive to understand, but let me just walk through each of those. The first column is, obviously this is on an hourly basis, is the day ahead market. The first column is the day ahead forecast, and that is effectively the CAISO load forecast for the CAISO area that we generate in the day ahead time frame. It's on an hourly basis. The second column, that is day ahead net load forecast, is the result of having the day ahead forecast, the first column, subtracting all the contribution of the VR resources, all the wind and the solar from the forecast level. This is not based on the dispatch that may be potentially different in some hours. This is simply load forecast from the day ahead minus renewable forecast from the day ahead. The third column, the day ahead forecast plus reserves, is the first column, the day ahead forecast, plus the operating reserves that we have scheduled as the requirements for that given trade date. That accounts for the requirements that make up the spinning and non-spinning reserves. These are effectively inputs that come into the market. Now, the next column, the ROC forecast adjustment. This is the genesis of the report. This is the manual adjustment that is done on top or in addition to the load forecast that is utilized to clear the ROC process. This value can be either positive or negative. Typically for this time of the year, when we are in these conditions, you may see a positive number, and typically it's going to start to show up for the ramp evening, night hours. This is the value that we have provided in a summarized fashion in the June report, in the MPPF, and this gives you the full granularity of exactly how many megawatts have been adjusted in the day ahead forecast for the given trade date and trade hour. When you take this ROC forecast adjustment plus the day ahead forecast, that is effectively what the ROC process is going to be clearing against. That is the adjusted load forecast that is going to utilize as the requirement. Now, this becomes effectively inputs into the ROC process. Once we go through the clearing process of ROC and we find an optimal solution, finding schedules for all resources, including imports and exports, we may go into the market solution. The first column related to the market solution is what we call the ROC shortfall with forecast adjust. And this is the one that measures, that quantifies the amount of infeasibility in the ROC process. We have the power balance, supply equals demand. When we are unable to hold that equality strictly, we are going to be infeasible. We may have too much generation or too little generation depending on the condition. When we are talking about that we don't have sufficient supply, we are talking about an undersupply infeasibility, or a shortfall that is more intuitive to understand without the mathematical jargon. So if there is a case, and this could happen by hour, in which the ROC process was unable to meet all the forecasts that includes the ROC adjustment, the total forecast adjusted using ROC, there will be a number in there for any given hour. And that will indicate by how many megawatts the ROC process was unable to meet the adjusted load forecast. The subsequent column, the ROC shortfall, is a back of the envelope calculation. And that is an estimate that we do, is not part of the solution, is an estimate that we do of the ROC shortfall, the infeasibility, if we were clearing against the standard, the normal day ahead forecast with no adjustment. All what we do is take the ROC shortfall with the forecast adjustment and subtract the rock forecast adjustment. And if the value is positive, it means there is still an infeasibility even against the standard day-ahead forecast. This is just to give you a reference how much of the infeasibility is contributing from the rock adjustment or how much is still infeasible against the 50-50 load forecast that we used. The last piece is also a reference in relationship to the solution of rock and is labeled as the rock self-schedule export reduction. This is high priority exports that we are talking about. If we reach a case in which the rock is infeasible and we have to be power balance infeasible, there will be conditions in which we may be infeasible concurrently with cutting different levels of exports, potentially including the case of curtailing the high priority exports, because as you may recall through all the discussions we have had so far, the high priority exports eventually may be curtailed if the infeasibility is to the level that it has to reach that level. We start getting curtailment from the economicals. If we still need to go deeper, we go into the low priority. If we need to go one step deeper, we start going into the high priority concurrent with the relaxation of the power balance of the rock process. When you see a zero value for a given hour, effectively means all the exports high priority that were clear in the IFM, in the integrated forward market, were fully scheduled in the rock process. There was no need to make any reductions on those. You may see only a positive value in some cases, indicating that we are to the point where we have to reduce in the rock process certain level of exports in relationship to the integrated forward solution. And that's all what we are presenting. I think the main objective of this table is to give you the transparency about the rock forecast adjustments. We wanted to give you an extra piece of information here to provide more context of how that plays in terms of the market solution when we are talking about rock. And that's all what this report is about. So, Jimmy, I think now it would be a good time to see if we have any follow-up questions.
Thanks, Guillermo. Yeah, I'll check in with Marvin. I'm not sure if we have any questions in the queue, but as mentioned, please use the raise hand icon. If you dialed in separately, then you would push #2. And we haven't seen any chat questions come through as of yet.
Okay, we do have a couple of questions. I'll go ahead and take the first. Caller, your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Dan Williams from Customized Energy Solutions. Can you hear me okay, Guillermo?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, great, thank you. So just a couple questions, but first just really appreciate your team getting on publishing this information and doing so quickly. I think it's a great service to the market, so I really appreciate that. Been looking at these since they came out, and one question that I'm having is just how the columns, and I think it would be the RUC forecast adjustment plus the day-ahead forecast, how those add up in comparison to the RUC information that's published in the daily day-ahead market watch. And I don't know if that's something that you can pull up and walk through, or just if you know what I'm talking about, how the one of the charts that's in the daily day-ahead market watch is the RUC procurement, and I think compared to the IFM cleared shape for the day, and then it has the RUC prices next to it in a chart. But in the last day where there's able to do a comparison on August 9th, I was just having a hard time lining up the figures, and I'm guessing that there's something I'm missing there.
Yeah, I will have to go back and check the report. I just don't have all in front of me, or I don't recall all the details of what we generated for that. My first reaction would be that you can portray the information either from the supply or the demand side. And I suspecting that the one that you're looking at may be from the supply side. And for instance, when we're invisible, the amount of invisibility is going to create a delta. That could be one potential case when we have very tight conditions. But I can go back and I think we can update you on what that exactly. I think tomorrow we have the market update call, and I can confirm what the data that is pointing to make sure that you can cross-check between these values and the display that we have in the daily market watch.
Yeah, that would be great. And then I guess also just thinking if when you look at those, just whether having the IFM cleared quantity would be a useful column in this report, just as another data point if it's easy to add in there or not. But the last question was just asking whether you would be able to go back and run this for the couple days. I think there's maybe one day in June and one day in July where we had a couple hours of RUC infeasibility. Is it possible to run this after the fact just to get us an idea of kind of how the numbers fill in those last three columns when there is a shortfall?
Yeah, I can take that back, and I think we can explore if it's feasible to go back to previous days than just the moving forward approach. Yeah, let me take that back and see if we can put those days back.
Thanks, and we'll cross our fingers that those are zeros for the rest of the summer. And that's it.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, we'll go ahead and take the next question.
Hey, Guillermo, this is Seth from DC Energy.
Hey, Seth.
I have a question about the methodology or how you calculate the RUC forecast adjustment. And I guess, is it done by some predetermined confidence intervals? So you might apply like a 95th percentile forecast. Is there some kind of methodology like that the CAISO is using?
Yes, and I will refer to the answer I provided I believe I don't remember, the last MPPF or the June report discussion. You're asking really about how we arrive to this number, right, and how they are determined. This is, let me try to explain. The RUC adjustment at the end is an operator's call to ensure that they account for any conditions that they foresee that the market so far is not accounting for. Typically, one of the big components is going to be the weather uncertainty. And this doesn't mean that these values are going to be precisely all the time the upper confidence forecast that we generate. The upper confidence load forecast that we generate is a guidance for the operators, a reference to be more scientifically based in the calculation of that requirement. But there may be other factors that may contribute to the determination, the final determination of the RUC forecast adjustment. When we go more targetedly into how do we determine the upper confidence for the load forecast, that is more on the forecasting space. And effectively, we're trying to look in the history for similar days, similar conditions that face similar weather conditions, and see in that sample, in that distribution of cases, how high that forecast could be. In that sense, I could tell you that I would portray this to be almost basically at the upper bound. It's going to be basically the full set of the samples that we account for. So we don't necessarily have a specific percentile. We just go to the worst case scenario.
Okay, so it's like a P100. It basically covers all the forecasts. It's the tail of the distribution of all the proxy days.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll take the next caller.
Hey, Guillermo, it's Callie Wells with WPTF. Seth actually asked one of the questions I had, but first of all, I wanted to say thank you guys so very much for posting this data. I know it was a quick turnaround to get that available, and we really appreciate you guys putting in that effort. I know you mentioned that the external load and scheduling initiatives is considering more of a permanent long-term solution to providing this data. So I was curious, just based on the report name, it seems like it might just be a report you're issuing in this format during the summer months. Is that the intent, or do you think you'll be posting this information up until the other initiative has more of a permanent solution in place? Just trying to figure out if there might be a gap there where this data might not be available.
Yes, I can add some color to that, Kaylin. Thank you for questioning that. So the current plan that we have is that we continue to support this as a shop stop measurement, at least through the summer, meaning end of September. I would say that by the end of September, I doubt we're going to have a permanent solution, a long-term solution, because that would require the definition of what we need to post, and that discussion may be naturally taking place through the existing initiative that we have for the forward scheduling. I know this topic has been discussed there, so most likely through that effort, we're going to ground us to the level of transparency. This is not just the only item we are discussing in the transparency space. There are many others. So I would expect that naturally through this process, the outcome is going to be a set of data points or displays or information that we have to put together. And most naturally, that is going to fall into a standard project to bring all these data points for transparency. So what I mean is that this will take its own cycle, and therefore maybe taking longer than the end of September. Now, going back to your question, what would happen between the end of September to the first day when we have this long-term solution? If that long-term solution, and I have no idea about the time, so don't quote me on this, if for whatever reason the permanent solution is not in place for the upcoming summer, we will make sure that the information one way or the other is still there, and most likely we could continue to publish this report. Now, that said, naturally, I would expect that this information, this condition, this interplay becomes much relevant or sometimes a moot point during the non-summer conditions, because naturally the condition for driving that adjustment may not be in place. We have lower load levels, we have not such a tight supply conditions, so there may be naturally not much action happening in that space to perceive that you are missing a lot of information. But as I said, given the conditions, we are open to reassess our original plan to see if there is still a need, and if the need is there, we will continue to report that.
Okay, I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions, Jimmy?
I currently don't see any questions. Again, you can use the raise hand icon, or if you dialed in just with your phone, you can press #2.
Thanks, Guillermo. Good questions, everybody. Thank you. We do have a question asking if these values are or will be available on OASIS. Currently, they're available only at this web location at this time, so it's good feedback, though, to consider.
Yeah, what I suspect is that the long-term solution effectively may render to have a new OASIS display, but we just need to wait for what the permanent solution is going to be.
Great. Well, we appreciate it, folks. As mentioned, this was recorded, so it was a pretty quick call. I expect us to have it available hopefully by this week to post. So look out for that. And with no more questions, we do thank you very much again for joining us today, and we hope this will be very useful moving forward. And have a great rest of your afternoon, folks.